Thank you, and such a pleasure to be here amongst so many friends. I think it's still a too small community. That's probably why there are so many friends here. But today I'm here to give you my perspective on what is known as the nature data myth, which means, oh my gosh, biodiversity is the living fabric of this planet, its ecosystems, its species, its genes, and everything is going to hell in a handbasket. We are a corporation, we are two-thirds of the economy whose footprint is basically causing that hell in a handbasket. We should do something. We need data immediately. And we need how much data? Well, everything, surely. That sounds forbidding, and that's the nature data myth, which is we need everything, everywhere, all at once, by everyone. And that's not necessary, my friends. So my key message from, I hope, the next 7 minutes is tranquilo. So I'm going to begin by talking about two species which are in the rainforest, because you should be wondering, what am I if I'm an a technology company, an energy company, a bank, an insurance company, a advertising agency? What on earth have I got to do with any of this? I'm not a mining company. I don't drill holes. I'm not a forest logging company or a farm. I'm not a construction agency or infrastructure developer. I'm not an irresponsible tourism company. So it's not me. It's not me. But let's think for a moment. I want to talk to you about two species. Begin with the Amazon in the rainforest. When you set out from the mouth of the Amazon, if you travel up 1,450 kilometers up the river, you reach the city of Manaus. At Manaus, where the Rio Negro meets the Solimões, the river at the time I went there was 8 kilometers wide. And then if you travel another teensy-weensy 41 kilometers through a rugged track and a logger's trail, you'll reach what is imaginatively called Camp 41. That is the late Professor Tom Lovejoy's camp, where he did a long experiment. I was there as a guest. I spent many, many nights there. And every night we would go to sleep in hammocks to the lullaby of crickets and frogs. And it was peaceful until one morning at 4 a.m. I was awoken by what appeared to be hell descending. It was a loud cacophony of noise. And someone muffled said, "Oh, yeah, howler monkeys." So it's amazing to hear those tiny animals make so much noise, making the entire forest reverberate with that sound. The howler monkey is one of 15 species there, and as of now, it's that one is not threatened or endangered, but it's a very important seed disperser because, among other things, it eats fruit. And then I go to another rainforest, which is my favorite actually, in North Queensland, in Australia. Complex mesophyll vine forest. It's known that because they have these rattan vines. They call them lawyers' vines out there because once they latch onto you, those tendrils don't leave. And and, in that rainforest, there are many wondrous animals and species, and among them is the southern cassowary. Now, this one is endangered. There's only about 1,500 of them left alive. Um, it's a powerful creature. It's got claws that look like this, except about 1.5 times as big. And I request you, please, if you go there, please do. It's a beautiful place. If you go there, try not to get between a male cassowary and his chicks. And by the way, out here, it is actually the male that sits on the chicks and sits on the eggs and hatches them, and then looks after the chicks until they're too big to be called chicks, and then he shoos them off. So that's an interesting reversal of roles, I might imagine. But these two seed dispersers, and the cassowary is responsible for a lot of seed dispersal in the North Queensland rainforest. These two seed dispersers habitats are shrinking. The rainforest is shrinking. And yes, not in Australia, but in the Amazon, part of the reason is the food system and its ingress into forested land. But the main reason, in fact, on average, why rainforests are shrinking is something as simple as climate breakdown. It is actually greenhouse gas emissions that are causing this shrinkage. So in that sense, those of you who are sitting in a bank with downstream impacts and financed emissions, those of you who are in any office or own a laptop, actually including myself, we are all causing the emissions which are causing the rainforest dieback, which is converting, among other things, the Brazilian rainforest into a grassland. So yes, we do have to own a degree of responsibility, but how much and when and exactly what am I or are any of you responsible for that particular howler monkey's loss of habitat and that particular cassowaries? Nobody knows. Neither do we need to know. That is my key message. So there is a lot of data, and you can work out what is your footprint on biodiversity, recognizing that biodiversity is a big thing. It's the living fabric of this planet, its ecosystems, its species, its genes. And that is a workable exercise. So what you do not need to do is this, which I call death by Google Maps, right? Try and find out where exactly is that location where I might have a footprint and where is it half, and then you go further and one further. Oh my gosh, and then you say, oh my God, it's pixelated. I can't see it. And how many of them are there? By the way, how many of those species are there in those two rainforests? We're talking about upwards of 1 million species, right? So even if I did by some magic know exactly what impact I have on southern cassowaries, I wouldn't know the rest. So no, you don't need to do any of that stuff. What you do need to do is to recognize that the state of nature is being measured by old institutions like governments and IUCN and UNEP and NGOs, large NGOs, and new institutions like the Nature Positive Initiative, which you must have heard yesterday and earlier today. So there are people measuring the state of nature. And yes, the state of nature is declining, and that is the problem. But it is all beginning with the economy that is destroying nature, and 2/3 of the economy is private sector. So in fact, it is pressures and therefore biodiversity footprints where we should begin. The state is where we end. There is no point getting paraplectic about the state of nature in any of those locations, even if you happen to be BHP, which is the company whose mine is that fuzzy pixelated piece on the right-hand side with the yellow dot. Because if you are BHP, here's what you can, in fact, do. If you really are concerned about the location, you will know what is in that location and you can go there. But more importantly, you can also find out if that's who you are, you can find out the location-based pressures that may happen to species which are there. And this is showing you all of the various species. And this is based on a system that we have developed, my company and I, called Just Impact. But more important than this is, what if you're not a mining company, not a forest, not a this, not a that? It is possible to work out the impacts of BHP on nature overall. And the interesting thing is that when we work it out, the way to do that is known as potentially disappeared fraction of species. And that potentially disappeared fraction, sorry, this is going a bit crazy out here. No, don't censor me as yet. It's got the potentially disappeared fraction of species is basically worked out knowing that, yes, your GHG emissions are known as part of your system. You know your water uses, that's part of your system. You know how much is your waste, toxic and non-toxic. You know how much is your water and land pollution. And so these 5 things, if you know what the volumes are, and by the way, most of you do because you've been publishing them quite happily in your sustainability reports and your CSR reports and so on. If you know those, and if you put them through the workings of the life cycle impact approach, then that will in fact give you the potential pressure in terms of potentially disappeared fraction of species. Now, I know the numbers, even though the system doesn't seem to be helping me. It's 4.8 times 10 to the minus 4. Does everyone know what that means? 4.8 times 10 to the minus 4 as a percentage probability of the disappearance of species through 1 year's operations of BHP. It doesn't mean very much. But if I convert that and say, aha, if you were to work out how much land cover would need to be depleted this year to generate the same effect on species diversity, that answer is more scary. That's 2,426 square kilometers. 2,426 square kilometers. That doesn't mean that that mining company is tearing up 2,400 kilometers of land. By no means. They just tear up maybe a few square kilometers of land for their mining. It's very targeted. But what is happening is that their water usage and their tailing dam waste and their SOx and their NOx are causing losses in biodiversity around the planet, right? It's not just in Australia, it's everywhere. In fact, that's what we need to know. That's called biodiversity footprint. Now, there are many ways. In fact, a paper was researched last year, Damiani et al., 2023, which looked at 60 different ways of measuring biodiversity footprint. And then it narrowed down its research to 23 of them. And then it narrowed those 23 down to approximately 2, which included recipe and LC impact. These are 2 different methods. All of these Top 23 are using a potentially disappeared fraction as a yardstick for calculating the footprint. So there is consistency. I think Eva mentioned that there is thankfully commonality of thinking, and I'm pleased to say that there is. If we follow this approach, then you as a company, doesn't matter whether you are a private consulting firm with a bit of power use or a massive energy giant like Enel, you can actually work out your nature footprint. And it doesn't require boil the ocean or melt the planet work. Yes, you need data, but very scientifically, carefully chosen data on your footprints. Of course, you should be worried if you're those 5 sectors I mentioned, which have direct impacts on biodiversity. You should be worried about what kind of direct impacts and where and so on, and have action plans against them. But if you're the remaining hundreds of sectors, which constitute, by the way, something like 97 or 98% of the invested assets of the big investors on this planet, if you're those, like me, small consulting firm with lots of data usage, we can work things out. And we can then take actions on our biodiversity footprints to ensure that we leave future generations an Earth which is worth living for and living in. Thank you.